Welcome to the Impact Room, brought to you by Douglas Jackson, who help you hire more impactful, diverse leaders who stay for longer and are more successful. The Impact Room is a business, CX and leadership podcast where exceptional, diverse and impactful leadership and wisdom is shared. We dive deep into pressing topics that impact your customer-led business, featuring interviews with CEOs, COOs, Chief Customer, Chief People Officers, directors, influential leaders and subject matter experts who share their lived experiences, top tips, thoughts, advice and industry trends to help elevate existing and future talent. So let's dive into our next episode, and please don't forget to like, subscribe or share if you enjoy this content. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Impact Room, where I'm joined with James Bell. James was previously the Data Enablement and Operations Director at News Corp and has previously worked for Dow Jones and KPMG. James, pleased to meet yourself today. Obviously, I've given you a quick introduction there, but please do tell us who you are, what you're about, and give us that quick elevator pitch if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely to speak to you today, Perry. So James Bell, I have 24 years in IT. I'm in that kind of central part of the Venn diagram between a traditional IT manager's background. I was the IT manager of investment bank for 5 years. I then moved into risk and compliance and global compliance, helping banks, money laundering, reporting officers, that sort of thing. I ran a professional services team for a vendor. We went out and did something like 400 projects around the world. And then I moved into AI, firstly at KPMG, and then as the head of AI and machine learning at Dow Jones, which was a fascinating career that really got me involved in AI strategy as well as the operations, and very much into AI risk and governance. And I ended up at Dow Jones's parent company, News Corp, as the head of data enablement and operations, which is a combined role as a kind of senior person for the chief data officer to help him expand his team, but also to look at AI risk and governance across all of their organizations and business units.
Brilliant, great stuff. Thanks for that introduction. And obviously, some people might know you've obviously published book on this stuff and whatever else as well. And I think you're currently writing another one at the moment on AI. So yeah, I'm sure that will come out. But James, obviously, there's more to you than just data. I mean, we've had a couple of conversations now, and I know all about your traveling around the world, and I believe you've used AI to actually produce a short film on traveling and stuff. So, as I know, many people won't. You have travelled the world. So, what has been your kind of favourite travel destination, or maybe area that you have done, and what made you produce this film on AI, really?
So yes, I've travelled the world as a backpacker. 2008, 2009, my wife and I took a career break, ironically, just before the credit crunch hit, and a lot of people were like, "Did you see it coming?" I was like, "No." If I had done, I would have put all my money into gold and not into iSafe, and Northern Rock, of all things. But yes, as a backpacker, I would say my two favourite destinations. Well, I loved China. China was an enormous surprise, and particularly climbing Mount Wudan, which is where Tai Chi was invented.
Mm-hmm.
It's something like 20,000 steps up this mountain. It takes about 4 hours to get to the top, and you go above the clouds, and there's a beautiful golden temple at the top, which is a Buddhist Taoist temple. So that was really special, although my legs ached for days afterwards. Going up was one thing, coming back down was quite something else.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But also New Zealand. I think if I'd gone to New Zealand last in our tour rather than first, I probably would never have come back. But as in business, I did in 2018, I did a world speaking tour for Dow Jones, and I traveled all across the world debating Google on stage on the future of AI. I'd say my favorite there was probably Hong Kong. I absolutely loved Hong Kong. It was very nice.
No, brilliant stuff. Yeah, we've actually got some family friends from Japan, and I think Asia is such a wonderful area of the world. Yeah, it's somewhere I've never been to, but definitely is on the hit list. So no, thanks for sharing that and sharing your insights. So look, as you've already said, you've got 24 years plus experience in data, insight, AI, analytics, all the fun things in the world, shall we say? So what? Look, you've as you mentioned previously, you were talking about this back in 2018, doing world tours, etc., etc. So, but what do you see as the biggest opportunity across the data analytics AI space right now, James?
Well, actually, I was looking back because I met with a friend I was on the speaking tour with the other day at a video of the tour, and I was talking about how AI was going to become commodified, and I was really right. I mean, what has happened with the large language models and the vendors that are selling large language models is it's all accessed via API. So in terms of a strategic opportunity, it's really there through being able to access and query these things as individual chargeable units, a bit like cloud compute. But that also comes with the attendant risks of doing that. And so the impact in the analytics world is that you need to have a much stronger governance structure to be able to actually get the value out of it without choking on the marrow, so to speak.
Interesting. Okay, fine. And when looking, I suppose looking back to that speech in 2018, and obviously that, I mean, if you just mentioned, obviously you predicted it quite accurately, kind of where we're going to get to. So I suppose, what else, if you were to, I suppose, look back at that speech in 2018, you probably don't remember all of it, but what else do you think has been a big game changer over them last 5 years? And I suppose that's the first question. Yeah, what else do you think has been a big game changer you've seen over them 5 years? And I suppose, and the follow on from that question is, what do you think will be the biggest game changer in the next 5 years?
So one of the things that I identified when I was running AI for Dow Jones is that there's this kind of new Moore's law, this new wheel of AI, where you start with larger data. So data is, big data is always expanding. It's a bit like light speed, the horizon is always growing. The amount of data in the world is exponentially growing, and that drives the need for more hardware to be able to process that data. And you find that this goes around in a cycle, and once you have more hardware and more processing power, you are able to use more complicated algorithms to process it, and more complicated algorithms needs more data in your background in this cycle. So trying to work out where we are right now, you can then predict what is the next step. And what I've been seeing is that we've had this big jump with the language models. What data scientists were coming back and telling me was that for some things that we thought the large language models would be absolutely brilliant at, they're not as good as traditional machine learning methods. So, for example, you're trying to extract text from something, and you've got this large data set of original scan text, say, and you're trying to drag off what the text is and turn it into a digital format. The large language model can hallucinate, and so you need to have an editorial review process to the point where you might as well have done it by yourself. And those data scientists are stepping back to using classical machine learning models. So there's kind of like the ripple of the pond of impact of large language models are kind of bouncing off the side of the wall and coming back. And there's a bit of pushback. And what that's driving is the next step. And the next step will be, well, we need new architecture. We need new hardware. We need new processing power capability. And that's why you're seeing companies like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, suddenly quantum computing is back in the news, because we need the hardware to be able to drive the next generation of these algorithms. We've kind of reached the point with current capabilities. And so predicting where the next thing is going to be is to say, people are going to be designing and building completely new architectures, and that will lead to another revolution in being able to use a next generation of AI algorithms. And so it's unlikely to have such a sea change as we've seen between classical and LLMs again until after that architectural part of the wheel.
Interesting. Okay, brilliant stuff. And I'm just picking up on that poster behind you that say things will change. By the sounds of it, things will definitely change.
They will. In fact, that is the poster for my film. So
there you go.
When I went traveling, I filmed something like 19 hours worth of footage, and I've used it and sold some of it as travel footage. Google some, for example, for an advert that they ran. But I wanted to create a modern film out of it, something 30 minutes long. And of course, it's all in old school Handycam from 2008. And so I used a number of AI solutions to upscale it all 4 times to 4K, 60 FPS. And the quality of those products now is so high that you're able to upscale and stabilize footage that was really in somewhat of a dire state, and actually produce a film that you can then go onto the short film circuit and put into competitions and things like that. It's been a lot of fun.
Good stuff. Happy days. So, and I think that's it, isn't it? Really, I think there is the capability of AI is endless. But I think you have got to start somewhere first. If you don't start anywhere, you'll never. I mean, we were having a conversation just before we started recording this around obviously the famous Stephen Bartlett quote around the quicker you fail, the quicker you succeed type of approach. And I think AI is definitely in that space. I think you've just got to try stuff and see where it comes really.
So there's 2 kind of tiers of ideas. The first one is to say, and I used to go around saying this a lot, and I still do say it, that look for the manual burdens in your business, your process burdens. And that's the type of change where you're changing part of a process. So you're augmenting the humans to be able to do things faster and better. And that's generally what the military does, for example, human machine teaming, these sort of approaches. But those first order ones are much easier to put in, and they're often about operational efficiency. We can do things faster, we can do things better, we can do things with less people. The automation is really helpful. But the second tier is where you're doing something that's really moving the needle and you're being quite disruptive with the change. So instead of changing a part of a process, you're changing the whole thing. And this is more what economists mean when they're talking about automation. So that would be, for example, humans used to put cars together, and now it's done with robotics, right? So you're completely taking the humans out of the realm. And where those ones are, that's where you can get a lot of value, but you have to balance that against the fact that you are replacing humans in a particular process. And finding that balance is often really difficult for companies. They really want to have the benefits of these new approaches of full automation and all of that, but they also don't want to become a completely non-human organization. They have customer services requirements and things like that. So finding that balance as a strategy is what's really important, and adding in the process of risk and governance across the top. One of the most common risk and governance issues is that because AI has become, or at least the way we're accessing AI at the moment, has become very commoditized, it's getting embedded in a lot of products. So you will work with a particular vendor, let's just say Salesforce, say, and they're using an API call out to OpenAI from their system to do the Gen AI part of their product. So from a legal point of view, who is it who's to blame when there's an issue with something? Our way that we govern products is based around the end results, whereas with AI, we're talking about parts that are embedded, or worse, if we're talking about driverless cars, multiple parts that are working in conjunction that are all from third parties. So who is it who becomes responsible for the product at the end when it's from the legal point of view? This complication is a real sort of debate area at the moment in the whole AI governance, AI legislation space. How are you going to control that? It's quite interesting how different government bodies like the EU, for example, are coming up with ways to try and address this concern.
Interesting. Yeah, no, you make a great point there. As you say, like with the driverless cars, is it the person that's still sat behind a steering wheel that's still in control or not? Obviously, just to bring it to a real life example there that most people understand. Yeah, it's a great example, isn't it? And obviously, if you, as you say, you put that into your computer software, if your computer software does something that you didn't expect it to do or fails, then is it who when you've got multiple systems talking to each other, actually who is who is the main responsibility, or is it the business who owns the data?
So I used to start speeches with an example of driverless cars. And I said, okay, so we have a driverless car, it's racing down the street, and there's two people crossing the road, and it has to swerve, and it's going to hit one of them. So the driverless car uses facial recognition cameras to work out who everyone is. It then logs into their social media accounts, works out who they voted for, and runs over the person who's voted differently from the person driving the car. And what I normally get from the audience is a chuckle that that's a crazy thing. But then I say, look at the data scientists in the audience right now. They're all slightly wincing because we could build that right now. Yeah. And so AI governance, risk and compliance is about the kind of what I call the Jurassic Park question. We're so obsessed with what we can do, we sometimes lose sight of what we should be doing.
Yeah,
and it's about, in some respects, having governance processes that respect the humanity and respect the way that the system is built, so that we don't end up in scenarios like that, particularly with AI. And a lot of the things that, you know, the big kind of worries that people like Elon have about the future of AI and things like that, we avoid those by having government regulation. And it's very common in any idea or term that it fits into this standard life cycle. So about 10 years ago, this person called Chung-Wei Chu came up with this idea that when terms are really new, they tend to be only found in specialist sources. So AI, for example, was started in the military, and then they end up in academic circles. And from academic circles, the public awareness of the term increases, so they end up in specialist journals, specialist magazines, then in the mainstream press. And if you follow AI through this cycle, what it does is it reaches a certain point where it's so well known as an idea in the public consciousness, it kind of hits this final phase, and the final phase is regulation. Governments finally come in and regulate. And if you follow through, and you can do this with anything, we built a system to do it with blockchain, for example. But if you do it with AI, you can see that it is just coming to the top of this curve, and the regulation is now coming. And that's where the sort of bad outcome futures are the government's trying to prevent that from happening.
Interesting stuff. Okay, fine. Obviously, look, you know so much around AI journeys. You've obviously delivered AI journeys in previous roles, etc., etc. So there is a lot of organizations out there that are at the very start of this journey, or have started and are in a minefield of what is AI and what is the difference between AI, machine learning, robotics, etc., etc. So I suppose, what one piece of advice would you give to a business leader, whether that's within the data or operations, or just a business leader like a CEO, etc., who was looking to progress their AI journey, was looking to invest in AI, has got a vision of what they envisage AI to look like, has started with the end in mind, that type of approach? What was your one piece, or maybe kind of biggest piece of advice that you would give them now, knowing what you know from your journeys?
So if you're talking about building AI solutions within your company, the real thing that has been successful is trying to get inside the black box. So traditionally, data science was a high mathematical part and knowledge domain, required PhD level data scientists to work in. And you have this, I've seen them before, process diagrams where it's a data in, there's a box in the middle with machine learning written on it, and then out the other end comes wonderful, glorious AI-based products. And it's kind of like that old meme where it's like idea, action, profit, exclamation mark. And the lack of understanding that was going on in there was the biggest impediment to businesses being able to actually progress. And so what they would do is they'd have some sort of basic idea. They would come to the data scientist and they would say, can you do this with machine learning or data science? And the data scientist would basically take a look at it and take a gamble that, yes, within the 6 months you've given me, I think I might be able to make that work. What I've designed, and what we ran at Dow Jones, and we ran this for our customers, is that they would find that the data is far too big to get a real good handle on. What they need to do is hammer on the use cases. So I designed a set of workshops that lead up to that box, so that the idea is much better understood and expressed. I based it on the Y Combinator Google Ventures type 5-day workshop programs, and I modified it for AI. And what it enables you to do is, in the problem definition workshop, is really go through and analyze what it is the use case actually can bring to the company, where it would fit in and change. You know, what type of automation, for example, is it the one where you're changing an inside process, or the one where you're changing the entire thing? And how can it be disruptive in a good way to what you currently do? And then you take a break while you go and look in the market. Who else has done this? Are there products doing this? Is there data scientists who specialize in this thing? And then you come back and build a solution workshop. And in that workshop, you then come out of the other side with a much better understanding of your use case, having worked through all of the kind of steps of the solution design. And when you take that to the data scientists, they go, the hypothesis I need to solve that problem, that I can do like this. And you've kind of made the black box a little less black. You've made it a bit more see-through, so you can see what's going on inside, and you have a much better chance of success. So preloading the use case analysis gives you a better result out at the end of the data science. So any COO or CEO who's looking to bring data science into their company and has some ideas, they need to hammer on those ideas, what we used to call in my philosophy degree, the crucible. Put them in the crucible, set them on fire, and you melt them down to their core component. And I learned this the hard way. I once pitched for a piece of business when I was at KPMG that I had totally over-designed. And years later, I was on a stage with someone from Google, and he started talking about this project that he'd done. And I was listening to him going, hang on a minute, that's my idea from KPMG. And I said to him, afterwards, I said, what was that? And he said, oh yeah, they gave us this company came to us with this idea that they had been given, and we boiled it down to the core key component of what was needed, and we just delivered that, and it did 99% of what they needed. And so they went with us rather than the original. And it was such a strong lesson, first of all, in copywriting your ideas properly, but secondly, about you have to boil down the essence of the use case and not over-design things in data science. Usually an algorithm is based on a very simple hypothesis, proving itself out in your training data set, and then being able to generalize that across a larger data set without too many drawbacks.
Okay, brilliant. And obviously, looking back at your career, obviously you've progressed through, as I say, through the ranks as such. As you say, obviously, left university, was obviously have done roles in the past, right down from obviously system administrator, I think was your first job that I read on LinkedIn, right through to an analyst, and obviously manager, senior managers, as you mentioned, worked a lot in the finance space, and then obviously finished up your last role with being at that kind of senior director level within data at a large kind of global organization. So for you, looking back at your career, what one piece of advice would you give to someone now who wanted to progress their career to become, might be currently at a senior manager, head of level, or even at a director level, looking to get to a chief data officer role or whatever it is? What one piece of advice, or could be a couple of pieces of advice, would you give to someone looking to progress their career in the data space, really?
So I recently spoke at a high school who asked me exactly the same question. It was on their careers day, fathers were interested
to
come in and talk about. And the kids said, what STEM degree did you do? And I was like, I did philosophy. I did a humanities degree.
Yeah.
And they also looked at me like, how did you end up? And we have this traditional idea that you start as a technical junior, you move to as a technical senior, and then at some point, Shazam, you're suddenly management and then leadership and so forth and so on. And so that's the standard progression. And what tends to happen is they don't give you training between going senior technical and management. You're supposed to just pick that bit up. And I was very lucky because I worked for a company a couple of years ago that's based out of Pittsburgh, that they recognized that this is not the right route for everybody. And some people want to stay just in the technical route. And so they had this entire route where you could do a 30-year career. They had someone at 30 years experience, but they weren't a manager because they just weren't interested in the leadership side. But to make that transition really successful, the main thing you need to do is you have to understand the business point of view. Now, for me, when I was in finance and working for banking, everything's seen through a particular lens called risk, right? It's whether it's when you're designing your products, whether it's designing risk and governance, whether you're designing loan applications. I had to learn how a bank sees a particular business domain, and that was the key to being a successful IT manager, because what I did was present projects to the senior leadership that were through that lens of how I was going to reduce the risk for them. For example, we had a big payments network that we ran in-house, and I outsourced it to a software as a service vendor, and that massively reduced our risk and the bad outcomes that you occasionally have in IT when systems would fall over, things like that. As you move through the different technical businesses that you work in, learn the data domain, learn the business domain that's attached to it. So hang in with the salespeople, hang in with the people going out and talking to customers. Only by understanding the business domain can you then propose technical solutions that will actually make sense to them and be successful. If you don't do that, then you will always be talking across purposes. And it's very common in data that the data officers, the chief data officers, talk in data, and the business knows, oh, a very talented person who really understands data, but I don't understand it, because they're not putting in terms that I can appreciate. And so learning that their part and helping them learn your part, I say, would be the key thing to do to progress into leadership, because you can't do strategy if you don't understand what that means. And the business, they will have a business strategy, and your job in the data team is to align your strategy with theirs so you make them successful.
It's that's a great comment. That's a final statement. And I think, it's something that it's something that I see quite common myself as well. When we're working with candidates and stuff that are producing their CVs can be very technical focused, because obviously that's what they do. But as I say to a lot of candidates, like, look, if a CEO or a COO or someone that's not got any experience within data is reading your CV, they're just going to be scared of your CV. It's also like, the thing is, as you know, everyone's out there for themselves majority of the time, and for obviously to improve the business. No one's out there to have the best data strategy. They're there to have, as you mentioned, the best business strategy, and the best business strategy, the data strategy, will align perfectly to that for them to grow and develop. And I think there is a real big piece to that, because data doesn't just sit in a silo area on its own in a corner. It should sit across the whole business, so you should understand the whole business. I think that's a great statement there. So yeah, no, thanks for that. Okay, brilliant. So look, you as mentioned, 24 years in the data industry. You're very passionate about it. You've written books on it. I know when we've spoke, you're looking to write another book hopefully next year on it. Yeah. So yeah, So where's the inspiration come from? What gets you out of bed every morning? I suppose, obviously, I know you've obviously did a job, and obviously you get paid to get out of bed every morning, I suppose, to do a job. But you've obviously done all this extra stuff. What inspires you, and why, really?
So my father was the global head of IT for a sign making company, Expanders, based out of Bristol, and I learned in summers and Christmases, going and spending time with him meant to go into the office. And so I became a corporate person and very comfortable in a corporate environment way back before I'd even left high school. And so what that experience and knowledge that he had given me about IT enabled me to do was go and follow other passions when it came to my diplomas and degrees and so forth. So I was able to go and do a philosophy degree, and I was wondering whether I was going to end up an academic and just working at universities. But that experience of working with my father meant I really loved computers. I just had an affinity and love for technology. And so I started looking for ways to bring both of those things together. And I started as a very hard technical person, working on AIX and RS6000s and what's called I-Series now, AS400s. And from there, I just found that I really loved leading and growing teams. One of the best things that I feel that I've done in my career was I grew a team at the anti-money laundering vendor I worked at. And we went out, and these people, they did 2 or 3 years with me, and then they went on in their careers in other places. But I still keep tabs on them, and I'm still in touch with most of them. And we still meet up and reminisce about the old days. And it's so gratifying to see that I was able to give them a bit of that early start head up, that training as a consultant, to become professional, to know what that actually means, and to go out and, having done it, that they were confident to go on to these great roles at Oracle or into banking, or to replace me when I left the company. And it's really rewarding. And so that level of reward is what gets me out of bed. And in my last role, you know, they were expanding the organization from only a few people to over 25. And that can be a lot of stress for managers who are put into difficult positions where they're perhaps not very experienced at managing that many people, and they need help. And when you go in and help them, and you see that they're being successful after that, it's so rewarding. And so that's what gets me out of bed, really, more the people than the technology. And in fact, the book I'm writing on AI is about AI ethics. It talks about the wheel of AI and things like that, but it talks about fundamentally that data scientists are people. And if you really want to understand the missing thing from the business point of view of artificial intelligence, you need to put the people back into it, and then suddenly it all starts making sense. And so I'm about 15,000 words into it so far. Hopefully I'll get it published later next year, else I'll probably release it as individual articles over my Substack, and people can subscribe and read it that way. But that's the point I really want to make, that what is exciting about data science is data science people. And they're often overlooked when you're thinking about artificial intelligence.
Oh, interesting. And obviously, so what was your degree in, again, just remind me?
So my first degree was in philosophy, University of Greenwich, 1996 and 1998. And I recently completed my MBA during lockdown. I got all my commute time back. And so driving myself bored at home, I said, I'll do an online MBA. So I did the one from Aston, and I got a distinction. So I got an MBA with specialism in finance.
Interesting. Okay, fine. It just, I say, it's really interesting. As I say, obviously, obviously, it's great to learn how you fell into data, as I say, through obviously your father's role and obviously following that. But yeah, to go, as you say, to go into university and study, as I say, something that's I suppose not. But the thing is, I think there is, and I was talking to someone the other day around this. I mean, data, as you already mentioned, data is such a such a wide type of thing that actually, I suppose, it is that business understanding which is actually just as important. And I suppose the thing is with the degree that you do, and it's obviously, I suppose it's understanding the fundamental questions, isn't it, a little bit of.
Yeah, they say that, and I coined a phrase in philosophy, that philosophy is not necessarily about having all the answers, it's about having a better understanding.
Right questions, yeah.
And when you know the right question, the answer is simple. You know, it's the same in physics. When you hear the words dark matter, that's just a question mark. It doesn't mean anything. There's probably something behind that and things like that. And you find this in IT. Ideas will have these kind of very broad, wide terms like data or service-orientated architecture, which then coalesce into something else. Like SOA became web services, which is now so embedded in how the world works that we've all forgotten about it. And it's the same with modern data ideas like data mesh, for example. I've spent the last year or so working very solidly on data mesh projects. And what we had to do initially was kind of get it like steam against a mirror, actually coalesce into something that was real, that actually identified and solved business problems. And that was the real challenge of going through these kind of murky ideas that people have had that are sometimes very academic, and building them in a way that will actually land and people will go, you know what, that's actually really useful. And it's the same with AI ethics. Companies will have, high-end principle documents detailing their principles and their values when it comes to AI. But how does that actually land to impact how the data scientists work on a day-to-day basis? You must always combine policy with practice. And I spent a lot of my time in all my roles trying to do that, right? Converting philosophical ideas, academic ideas, policy ideas into a practice that people who are actually doing it can then just follow the practice and be successful.
No, brilliant stuff. No, happy days. Great stuff. And is there anything else you wanted to share, James, or is there anything else that you kind of wanted as a, the stage is yours? Is there any kind of final thoughts or anything that you don't think we've covered today?
Oh well, we've gone quite
We have.
my career. I'm very interested in what's going to be happening in AI risk and governance in the future. So the EU law is out, but the guidance is currently being discussed at the plenary right now and will not be available until April. Knowing the EU, it will come out more like July. And then we'll suddenly have some practitioner best practice, code of practice. It's very important for companies right now to start thinking about these things before they're impacted by them. It's gone from that to actually just over 5 short years being able to have a properly defined legislation that actually makes sense, and then a practitioner guide out the back of that tiers your response to the legislation based on how much risk you're bringing in. So they've kind of put the banking lens on it that I was talking about earlier. Is it high risk? And are you going to have to assign someone to be responsible for that risk? A bit like the GDPR. So that I think is where there's a lot of excitement coming over the next year. And I'm looking for something that I can help in that sort of thing. And a lot of this will be contained within my book. So when that's available, please go and read it. And my travel film is available. It's called Things Will Change, as you saw. And it actually involves, I had an AI write me a poem, and then I used an AI voice translator to apply the poem over the top of the video, talking about the impact of AI on society and what's important. So it does have a kind of mix of travel and AI about it.
Brilliant, which is two big passions of yours, so it's the perfect mini film, and good luck with that, and obviously as soon as the book's available, and maybe we need to do a follow-up of one of these sessions mid next year when obviously, as you say, we get the governance from the EU, etc. And obviously be great to obviously have a look at your book when it's written, and obviously can share that with the network as well. But hopefully people have enjoyed this, James. It was an absolute pleasure. Obviously I will take yourself in on the video and stuff, so obviously if Pete, I'm sure the door's open if anyone ever wants to have a conversation with yourself. I'm sure you're always open to having a conversation if there's any questions from this, so thank you very much for joining us on the Impact Room today, James, and it was a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you, Perry.